Hello there. I'm David A. Specht, and I want to be your coach. If there's anything that I have learned in my 30 plus years of leadership and coaching, I have learned that mindset is everything. Join me and my guests as we explore the positives and negatives of that thing between our ears. This is Keep This in Mind. All right. Welcome to Keep This in Mind, brought to you by davidaspecht.com. And of course, I am David A. Specht. And today's show is really an interesting one today. Stephanie Dorwart is somebody who has just recently entered my circle through mutual connections. But here's the cool thing. We've got so many similar connections and circles. It's amazing that we haven't crossed paths yet. We were just talking about that prior to recording the show. She is the CEO of Altius Healthcare Consulting Group. She's a speaker. She's in leadership development. I mean, when you talk about parallel paths, I mean, it's just been, I'm just surprised I haven't seen her on a stage myself. But here's the thing. When we were talking about what we wanted to address in today's show, Stephanie wanted to talk about positive mindset, that productivity brings a positive mindset. But here's the thing. A negative mindset will never lead to the productivity that leads to the positive mindset. So, Stephanie, welcome to the show. I'm super happy to have you here. I'm going to shut up now, and I kind of want to hear your side of it, your story. How did you arrive at your belief system about mindset, and kind of give us a little bit of background about who you are and how you are?
Thank you so much, David. It is a pleasure to join you here today and to be here and to share some information, with your audience and talk about mindset. I'm going to go way back, if I have your permission to do that, Absolutely. To really where my mindset beliefs started. What a lot of people are not aware of about my background is I began my career as a public education teacher, and I taught mathematics and calculus and trigonometry. And many times I encountered students that had very, very fixed belief systems and had been told throughout their life that they couldn't do something. You're not good at math. You're never going to be able to do that. You should focus over here. And what I learned while I was in education is that you could actually adjust and change the belief systems of the students by fostering positive things and really getting them to reprogram the limiting beliefs that they had in their mind. So as an educator, just by telling them, hey, you're going to do great things. I believe in you. I know that you're going to amount to something. You're going to be able to develop. I saw very quickly that mindset had everything to do with it. So who they were when they came into the classroom was not who they were when they left. So over the course of the year, I could influence what they were doing by planting positive seeds in their mind. Now, I carried that into healthcare. After I left education, I moved into really working with hospitals and healthcare systems. My core is really productivity and workforce optimization. And anyone that knows anything about productivity, the first thing people think about productivity tends to be negative. Yeah. And what I learned with my mindset is that if I can start to plant those seeds with managers and leaders and start to celebrate small wins and change their belief patterns, you can now produce big things. And really, my whole core thing that I talk about and that I share with our leaders is productivity produces positive results. We all know that if we can control our time management, if we can, evolve our schedule, if we can be more effective and more efficient, good things come from that. Mm-hmm. But productivity doesn't matter if you have a negative attitude about it or a negative mindset about it. So really, my mindset beliefs have evolved over time that you have to learn how to first lead yourself, because if you don't lead yourself through positivity and productivity, you can't lead anyone else. So start here. Start with yourself, and that will transition to everyone else.
So you are in two very, I would say, negative dominated fields. What was it like for you in your own personal positivity mindset work as you were engaging so much negativity, whether it was from peers, whether it was from your bosses, whether it was from the general public? I mean, public education and healthcare are both very, like I said, they can be very negative spaces as organizations, as an entire entity. How were you able to keep or to birth, foster, and keep a positive mindset that you could then teach to someone else?
It's a great question, David. I love that question. And, if we talk about healthcare right now, we're dealing with difficult times. I hate to keep bringing it up, but, we're only a couple, years removed from the pandemic. There are a lot of workforce shortages. You hear the word burnout pretty much every 10 seconds when you're talking about hospitals or healthcare systems. And, healthcare is one of those areas where people get into it because they're passionate and want to make a difference. Mm-hmm. However, when there are obstacles and challenges and roadblocks in their way that they cannot figure out how to get over, they then go into the burnout phase, the negativity phase, and they really get disgruntled. The way that I've been able to overcome that, and the way that I work with our managers and others to overcome that, is you really want to focus on those small wins and staying core to your values. Because if you lose track about what's important to you and why you got into public education or why you got into healthcare in the first, why are you a physician? You're not going to be able to ground in your values and keep that positive thing. So always going back to the vision of what matters to you. What do you believe in? Why did you become a doctor? Why did you become a nurse? What matters to you? And the fact is, in healthcare, they tended to become leaders, doctors, nurses, because they want to make a difference. They want to deliver high quality of care. They want to do the right things, but they sometimes are in an environment where they can't do that. But we often, when we're in those situations, feel like we can't change it. And what, I've learned is that you have a lot more power to change the environment that you're in than you believe that you do. So how do I overcome those negative situations when I was a public education teacher and, there was negativity or there were budgets and couldn't do that? I understood that I could change the outcomes by my attitude. I could change the outcomes of my students by changing what I was thinking. And if I could do that, I could actually make a difference in everything. And that's the same thing that we work through with our hospitals. Sometimes there are so many challenges that they're facing, whether it's a lack of supplies, whether it's dealing, with a pediatric suicide patient. And in those challenging moments, it's very difficult to go back to that positive mindset. But if you root in your vision, root in your habits, root in your belief system, understand why you're there and what there is, you can really influence the environment and the outcomes a lot more.
I love how you said that it's almost like, working from the inside out. And even if the outside is so daunting and you feel like it's so fixed, one of the things that you brought to the table was talking about productivity and how productivity will also foster a positive environment. But what I've seen is, and you alluded to it earlier, there is an adversity to change in the mindset of most, I won't say all, but most, that even if it was the best thing that could ever happen to them, because it's change, there's a wall. What are some of the things that we can do as change agents? Because I believe that people who listen to the show and have listened to it multiple times, they kind of get the idea that they have to have the right mindset to be successful. But how does that spread? How can you break down the walls of the anti-change?
Yeah, anytime you're in an environment and you're looking at change, with the first words you're going to always hear is, this is the way we've always done this. This is how we do things here. This is how we accomplish it. And I don't have any compelling reason to change. The first thing you're always going to get is that resistance to the change. And until the reason to change becomes more important than the reason you don't want to change, you're never going to break through that resistance. So pushing through that change resistance is, again, really showing what it's going to look on the other side and then making it so easy that there's no reason not to change. For example, if you're looking, at a hospital and you're looking at the operating room schedule and the utilization rates, and you might have all these numbers and information, it can become very overwhelming. And it's much easier just to use the same schedule that they've been using for the past 5 or 10 years. However, if you now change one thing and you work on one small task, it's very similar to like a weight loss journey, where if you change too much at the same time, you're never going to get to the other side. So from a change management perspective, pick one component that you can influence. one component on that schedule to change and start doing that. So it's very much from that mindset of mental health and et cetera. Celebrate the small win of that change. And once it start doing things, then add in the next change that you're going to do. So from a productivity perspective, David, it's always focusing on making those small changes so that you overcome some of those obstacles, get some of the small wins early on. So when you have to overcome the big obstacle, you've already had success as a team. Because when you're celebrating those smaller wins, you can get on that momentum. And now you have the compelling case as a leader or as a person why you need to change. And you can jump to the other side and overcome the obstacle. But if you don't start out by making small changes to get to that change component, you're never going to get to the other side.
So I would like to ask, and something may spur your mind when I ask the question. So yeah, and we must change the names to protect the innocent. But can you take me through a scenario where you came in as a consultant, you had the resistance, you walked them through the path, you celebrated the small wins, and then you got to see the momentum. Can you tell me an instant? Like I said, it may be a combination of 5 instances that have very similar situations, but kind of take me through an actual case study.
So I will take you through probably I have several case studies, but one that really sticks out in my mind right now is we were brought into a hospital to put in place an accountability system and productivity targets and to coach and mentor the leaders so that they would never get into a situation where they had to have a layoff. What we did not know when we walked into that hospital, and this was on a Tuesday, we were going in for the big kickoff, unbeknownst to us, they actually just laid off 200 people on Friday.
Oh.
So we walked in, and of course, as the consultants, as the team, the initial assumption was Altius they're the ones that told them who to lay off. So imagine looking at 200 leaders who are all already very angry at you and talking about productivity. So that was a very hostile environment for us at first. But we do group education sessions and we talk through change management. How do you become the CEO of your department? How do you become the CFO of your department? And by having the mentoring sessions and the coaching sessions one-on-one and talking about great things for them to do to improve productivity, we got to the other side of that. And I am proud standing here. That was several years ago, but they have not had a layoff since. That particular client still utilizes the benchmarks and the targets, and they use it to adjust their staffing in real time so that they never get back in that situation. So the example is you build trust over time by working with the leaders and giving them concrete examples that are going to make a difference in their day-to-day life. And, with healthcare, it can get very, very stressful very quickly. And sometimes them just knowing someone's on the other side to talk about what they can do and have a resource is extremely helpful. But that particular hospital, we dropped $25 million of efficiency improvements to the bottom line over a 3-year period. And that was great because they could now buy additional capital equipment. They were able to hire more staff and able to do a lot more things. And by sharing those results, that then gave everyone fuel to keep going. So when we started the engagement and people were like, productivity, that's horrible. I hate it. We don't need it. I don't know why we're talking about this. It's just going to lay off more people. We ended with, okay, I now understand that when I become more productive and I have higher efficiency and better effectiveness and higher quality of care, this is going to help me see more patients in the day that I have and have higher quality and better patient satisfaction throughout it. So it's an example where we went in very hostile and ended very positive and everyone was very engaged.
Well, one of the statements that you said was improving the quality of care. And I would say that was probably the key metric that those who were adverse to the change needed to hear. Because when you talk productivity, a lot of times that's what automating, delegating, and eliminating, right? It's just that's all people think about. And so there's 2 lines of thought here. There's the process or the procedure, and then there's the people. And when both are embraced, we have good outcomes. we've talked about beginning to change the mindset, but how do you deal with, this is for some leaders that would listen to this podcast, how do you deal with those that refuse to embrace? Like they have this fixed negativity that they can't seem to let go of, maybe because of their upbringing, maybe because of they were told they didn't amount to anything, maybe they had a trauma in their life that created this mindset. Does everybody have the potential to go from negative to positive, or is there just some people that are just not going to be able to make that transition?
Great question. And I like to believe that everyone has the potential to go from negative to positive, but we have to be willing to go along for the journey, right? And there are some people that it takes longer than others. Now, when you're thinking about that, healthcare, education, regardless of where you're starting in that journey, it does start with the fact that you have to know why someone is doing what they're doing. So, regardless of what that is, that manager has past experiences, and there's clearly a reason that they're set in their ways, or that leader is set in their ways, or as a human being that you just don't want to change, whether it's you refuse to take out the garbage, or, you don't want to clean your room as a teenager. Something is causing you to act that way, right? So the question is, why are you doing what you're doing? Why do you have the negative attitude? What's causing you to respond in that way? Why don't you want to change? Why are you so adamant? And many times when you ask those questions and you really connect with the person and you connect with a human being and you understand it, you develop the empathy, the appreciation for that person, David, you can actually get them to then open up and you can make progress. But if you don't actually connect with the human being and you focus just on the process and the task and the outcome, you're never going to get past that, because they need to feel heard and they need to be able to share their story and be able, once you get to the why they're doing it, you can now unpeel it and start to get past that. But if you don't actually chip away at the resistance, chip away at the wall, chip away at all the reasons that they feel they haven't been heard. Maybe there's been a management structure that they weren't able to share what they wanted to do. Maybe they tried to do something and were shot down the path. If you don't break through that, they're not going to go from negative to positive. So it is a trajectory, but everyone has the potential to shift from that negative attitude to the positive, but you have to be willing. And in order to be willing, sometimes you have to get to the why, and you actually have to bring the feelings and the human being back into it.
That's good right there, because as a leader, we oftentimes see things from a strictly getting it done perspective, and that when a subordinate or employee, team member, whatever label you want to give them, act out or get obstinate, we oftentimes don't go any deeper to find out why they're doing that or why they're acting out that way. Which again goes back, your teaching career, you probably saw that on a regular basis, like a child acts out or a teenager acts out in class. You're like, the initial knee jerk is they're coming up against me, but the truth of the matter is they've just come out of something that has put them in that particular mindset. I think the next question would really it's going to speak to me for sure, because I'm 55 years old and I'm Gen X, and I grew up a certain way. I think a certain way. I work a certain way. Have you seen, or I should say I know you've seen, but how do you address how generationally we're now far more diverse than we ever have been? If there's probably at least 3 generations, if not 4 now in the workforce. They're all having to work together. They all have different worldviews. They all have different upbringings. They all have experienced different types of crises, traumas, and successes in their life. How do we bring them all together to work well together?
That's a great question, Dave. And this comes up often. I was just speaking with someone about this yesterday, and I'm also Gen X. And, right now we have baby boomers and all the way down to, millennials and younger generations. And as Gen Xers, if we get an email or a phone call at 10 p.m. at night, we're still up, we're going to respond to it. But younger generations, a lot of times they're shutting off at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. When they walk out of the door, they have that, work-life balance where they don't look at it. So if you need to get in touch with them, you might need to text message them. So how do we bring everything together? It's education, it's knowledge, and it goes back to understanding. As a Gen Xer, I need to have understanding and, education on what does make a millennial click and what are there. So it's very similar to personality traits and understanding how to work with different personality traits. We have to understand how to work with each of the other generations. But as leaders, we also have to be flexible enough to be able to be willing ourselves to change our expectations and our requirements in certain cases. There are some places where flexibility is going to be a lot more important right now. And healthcare is one of those. We have a lot of workforce shortages. Traditionally, you might work 12-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, and you work 5 days a week. But what if there's someone that needs to come in for 4 hours in the middle of the day for a reason? Well, we need to be able to accommodate that. And that's one of the things that some of the younger generations have a lot of expectations for is the accommodation of that. So how do we bring everyone together? Education, respect, understanding, and then setting expectations that we're going to work together as a team. And when you can meet in that expectation and understand why someone that, might be 20, 30 years older than you has different expectations and responsibilities, you can then come to the table and operate as a team. And also from a technology perspective, there are huge differences in how each of those generations utilizes technology. And there are some cases where, some people, it might take them 2 seconds, where for me, I am not technology friendly. It might take me 2 hours to do something. So also play to people's strengths. Understand what the strengths are of the people that are on your team, the people that you're working in day in and day out. And you can cultivate that positive attitude in the work environment by playing to people's strengths, acknowledging what they're good at, letting them do more of what they're good at. Because when we do that, you get that dopamine hit and the feel-good hit. And that brings on that positivity. If we're always focused on the negative and always focused on why the different generations can't get along and the fact that we're never going to be able to have 4 generations working on one team at the same time because of X, Y, and Z, it's never going to happen. But if you focus on the strengths of that and the fact that look at all of these different skill sets we now have, how fantastic it is that we have different individuals that grew up in different times and bring different perspectives together, you can then refocus what you're actually focusing on.
That's good. One of the things that I've learned between the generations, I was the generation that we were on the phone all the time, and I don't mean texting.
Yep, me as
If you
well.
call somebody, it's immediately, well, it must be bad. They could have texted me. If it's a phone call, it's either really important or really bad or both. And so that understanding that perspective, I have since learned that when dealing with certain members of my teams, keep it to a text unless you really need to get clarity, or text them and say, look, I need to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. Don't leave it open-ended, or else, overthinking comes into play. and you're saying, look, I need to talk to you about this. Do you have some time to jump on a Zoom or something like that? So yeah, that relaxing your even your communication structure maybe in order for, to make all of the generations work well together.
And if I can just play off of that for 1 second, just with email. Email is such a hard thing because you can't have tonality in an email. It might be just one sentence. And there's a lot of mental health components that come along that, where you sent the one sentence email out and someone on the other end of that email has gone down a complete and total path of destruction when it was just a simple thing. So I think that plays into it too, because it's just a simple direction and the other person is going down that component and everything that comes along with that. So just an understanding of different communication styles is always important.
Absolutely. So this will be an interesting question. I was thinking about it as you were talking about all the things that people can implement, and you talk about your own personal journey through basically embracing positivity as a way of life. who or what or both were some of the influences on you as you were going through this journey? Like if I'm the type of person that's like, look, I know I'm kind of negative and I really want to change and I really want to, embrace some things. What are some of the tools or resources or, whether it's books, podcasts, whatever, what have been some of the influences on you and your journey?
Great question. I love that. And I'm going to start with I used to be one of the most negative people that you would ever be. That was my default. My grandmother defaulted to the worst case scenario. So if there was anything that was happening, she would figure out the worst case scenario and it was the end of the world. And she would live there. Bless her heart. She was an amazing woman, always had a smile on her face, but her default was negative. And I've had to overcome that my whole life. And so when I started into my, personal transformation journey, I started really focusing in, early days. It probably started just about you did with Brendan Bouchard, back in 2008. I did a lot of Tony Robbins, and some of the things that have made a huge difference for me seem so simple, but they're things like meditation in the morning for just a couple minutes. So before I look at my phone, before I do anything, I'm meditating and getting just quiet. It might be in bed. It may, sometimes I might play music, sometimes not, but it just gives me that time to just think, about my day and really, go into my and get, really grounded with my breath work. And I'm a, big believer in God and spirituality. And so I always, would start with prayer, and prayer grounded me and always took me from whatever negativity I was thinking, knowing that there's a larger force than me that's guiding me. And that gave me that grounding as well. And also spending time reading something that was going to grow my mind every day, even if it's 15 or 20 minutes, some type of book was always good. And then looking for personal affirmations. And the great thing to all of your listeners today is there's so much information and knowledge that's out there, that you can find to do any of those. And when I say personal affirmations, I'm just not talking of, a lot of people think that, personal affirmations aren't going to do anything for you because, you're just saying something in the mirror. It's not to come to fruition. However, the subconscious mind is more powerful than any of us think. So really recognizing anytime a negative thought, it doesn't matter how negative it is, and just flipping it. So if you're saying, I can't do X, just flipping it and how can I do that? Or, whatever that's coming in, those have been big things that have really impacted me. But getting to mindfulness, it really starts with, really understanding yourself through meditation, gratitude, prayer, and all those have great practices. But where can people look? I think, Brendan Bouchard's always resonated with me. Tony Robbins has been a great one. More recently, Coach Michael Burt, I believe, has a lot of great resources that are out there. He has podcasts that are there. Your podcast is a great place. But if you're looking for anything, regarding positive attitudes, ways to change, right now, there's all kinds of resources.
Yeah, I would say that there's been almost a revival of growth mindset teaching that, whether it's, I'm a person of faith, so there's certain things that I think get a little bit out there, but at the same time, some of it lines up with what faith really is, the evidence of things unseen, being able to believe in something you can't see or taste or smell, and one of my big beliefs, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, is that I choose to be positive even when I feel like it's negative. So for me, I tell people all the time, I'm like, I'm a overthinking compartmentalist, which is like the worst two things you can be, because you can be going through like major overthinking trauma inside, but you can put on the face of everything's hunky-dory on the outside. But what I've learned is that even when I'm overthinking, or I come in contact with something very negative and it really is affecting how I feel, I still have the power to choose of how I will react and how I address it. And I want to say, do you see that as a trait among a lot of people, is that their feelings oftentimes override their choice when their choice should override their feelings?
Absolutely. I see that a lot of the times, we're working with different individuals because we get into reactive mode. When you're putting out fires on a day-to-day basis and you're always looking at what's the biggest issue that you're dealing with and whatever that fire is, and the particular moment can be anything. You're focusing and coming at it from emotion. And when you're in that emotional state, you're reacting. You're not proactively thinking about it. And I loved what you said, because you can acknowledge that, yes, there are fires going on around me, and I, as a leader, are responsible for putting them out. But you can pick what you're going to focus on at that time. Take the biggest fire and put it on the side in a box and deal with it later. And then just come back and react to whatever's occurring, whatever that is. And what I have found that's really effective is staying calm, controlling your breathing in that moment. So if everything's spiraling around you, and whatever's happening, if you can just understand it and then go back and breathe and just take 3 deep breaths and, come back to the present moment, you can then emerge with a much more positive attitude and even a different perspective on what's happening. And when you take that and you breathe deeply and you just ground yourself again, you can then start to process things, because when you're just responding and you're in that fight or flight mode and the monkey brain's taking over, you don't have the capability to really have the ability to process what's happening and make the right decisions. So if you actually slow things down and pause, you can make a completely different decision. And as you mentioned, David, get that positive outlook on things.
Well, Stephanie, it has been amazing having you on the show today. I think if somebody came onto the show listening and had negative things going on in their life, I think we've given them not only the why behind becoming a more positive person and more positive environment, but certainly some practical tools to help them start their journey. But I know that this is your purpose, your passion. This is what you want to bring to the world. So how does somebody follow you? How does somebody get in touch with you? How can somebody engage with you so that you can help them, whether it's corporately in the healthcare or individually in your coaching? Kind of give us all your contacts.
Absolutely. People can follow me with my first and last name, Stephanie Dorwart, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and they can also find me on Twitter. And they can reach out, direct message me. They can message me, via phone if they want, email, all those components. But I'm very easy. First and last name, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and they can find me there.
Fantastic. Stephanie, once again, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for bringing insight. Thank you for bringing your attitude. And folks, I encourage you, follow her, listen to her. I Facebook stalked her, so I know about the content she puts out there, which is all very good. But again, and I'm gonna close the show once again with the same phrase, because now more than ever, we've given you some knowledge today. It's the application of that knowledge. It's not knowledge that's power. It's applied knowledge that's power. God bless. That is going to do it for this episode of Keep This in Mind. For more, visit davidaspecht.com. Like, follow, and subscribe. Thank you for listening, and remember, applied knowledge is power. God bless.